welcome. My name is Susan Tabersh, and we're so happy to see folks here for the second talk in our Healthy Soil series, The Magic and Mysteries of Climate, Soils, Plants, and Trees. Kate is a longtime homesteader. She's an educator, a musician, and a very active member of the Forums, Forests, and Food Systems group in Climate Action Now. She has a passionate interest in getting people excited and hopeful about the potential for helping heal the climate by removing damaging atmospheric gases and restoring them in plants and healthy soils. And after her presentation, as usual, we'll have time for questions and answers with Kate. And so I'm now very pleased to introduce Kate O'Connor.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kate, and I'm going to be presenting the magic and mysteries of climate, soil, plants, and trees. So what is climate? Climate means the usual condition of the temperature, humidity, atmospheric pressure, wind, rainfall, and other factors in an area of the Earth's surface over a long time. This is different than weather, which consists of the local conditions in one region from day to day. What creates climate? Climate is created by interactions of the light and heat from the sun with atmospheric gases surrounding the Earth, the oceans, and living creatures. Oceans and living creatures breathe in and absorb atmospheric gases. Just like the oceans, living creatures can change the balance of gases in the atmosphere through absorbing, growing, and storing these elements from the atmosphere in their tissues. We'll come back to this a little later. The atmosphere is the layer of gases around the Earth. It is held in place by Earth's gravity, the force that makes a planet or other body draw objects towards its center. Earth atmospheric gases are comprised of about 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, 0.9% argon, and 0.1% other gases. Among that 0.1% of other gases is carbon, a very important element that makes up about 14% of our human bodies and about 50% of plant structures. This carbon is not present as a single element, but it's joined by atoms of other elements. All living things consist mostly of carbon-containing compounds. The original climate on Earth, 4.5 to 3 million years ago, when Earth was a baby planet, was hot. Earth's surface was molten lava and gave off helium and hydrogen gases, which dissolved into space. The next version of our atmosphere was probably mostly carbon dioxide with little or no oxygen. There were smaller percentages of water vapor, ammonia, and methane. As the Earth cooled down from a fluctuation in its distance from the sun, most of the water vapor condensed and formed the oceans. There was still not much oxygen in the air until bacteria developed in the oceans about 3 billion years ago. Just like plants today, these bacteria were able to use the sun's energy to make their food by a process called photosynthesis. With photosynthesis, most plants and some organisms create food sugars and carbohydrates for energy from the sun's light. They combine it with water from the Earth and carbon dioxide that they breathe in from the atmosphere. Oxygen is then released back into the air from the plants and organisms. About 3 billion years ago, the masses of tiny bacteria in the ocean changed the atmosphere of the world as they breathed in and removed carbon dioxide, a dense greenhouse type gas which traps more of the sun's heat in the atmosphere. Moving the carbon dioxide and storing it in the oceans helped the Earth's original hot climate to cool down more. The molten outer layer of our planet hardened to form a solid mass of bedrock, which made up the Earth's land. The increase in oxygen that the bacteria released helped build up the ozone layer in the atmosphere that protected the land from lethal levels of ultraviolet radiation, making it possible for living things to venture onto land. This is where the story of soil and all life on land begins.
The creation of soil has taken millions of years, but for us to truly understand it, we must first look to its origins and find out exactly how it was formed. Fundamentally, soil is derived from bedrock, and it's the weathering and eroding of this bedrock that starts the process of soil formation. Over time, bare rock like these are exposed to the elements, with weather like wind and rain, heat and freeze thawing helping to break up the surface of the bedrock, fracturing it into many smaller pieces. Eventually, these pieces are broken up further and form the physical component of soil. As you might imagine, almost nothing could grow on a pile of fractured rock like this. There are minerals present in the rock, but they're unavailable for the plants. And there's almost nothing to hold water, which is essential for life. This is where microscopic life comes in. Microbes and algae are able to utilise the minerals held in the rocks and start to grow in the little nooks and crevices. Most importantly, these tiny organisms fix nitrogen and carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, leading to a build-up in organic material. And this process paves the way for another key group of organisms that are instrumental in the process of soil formation. These are the lichens. Lichen gets most of what it needs to survive from the atmosphere, hence its remarkable ability to survive in extreme locations. Lichen is formed from an incredible symbiotic relationship between algae and fungi, and it's these bizarre organisms that would have been the first to take advantage of the organic material left over by the microbes and algae. Not only can lichen survive without soil, but through the secretion of acid, it also chemically erodes the rock that it grows on, which frees up a wealth of beneficial nutrients. When the lichen dies, a small deposit of organic matter is left and gets trapped inside crevices within the rock. As more and more lichen grows and dies, this layer of organic matter, rich in nitrogen and essential minerals, builds up, allowing rooting plants a foothold in an otherwise inhospitable environment. This process is long and slow, typically taking 500 years for just 1 centimetre of topsoil to form. This old quarry is a great place to see soil formation in action, as it mimics the natural evolution of soil. Originally, there would have been a lot of bare rock like this, but over time, as the organic matter built up and up, it's led to the succession of larger and larger plants. As these die, they feed into the formation of more soil and allow a diverse range of plants to grow.
Plants eventually developed from algae in a mutually beneficial relationship with pioneering bacteria, fungi, lichens, and other organisms that lived on rocks and helped create the developing soil. So what is soil? Soil consists of minerals, air, water, soil organic matter, and living soil creatures, including bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, worms, and other critters. This abundant life under the ground in the soil supports all of the land-based forms above the ground, including us. Let's go underground to take a look.
These towering Douglas firs depend on networks of tiny fungus for water and other nutrients. We typically see only the fungal fruits that poke above the soil, mushrooms. But a lot is happening under the surface. Let's dive below ground to take a closer look. Living fungal threads called hyphae connect the mushroom to an underground network of activity. Ants help maintain healthy soil, aerating the dirt, circulating water, and moving nutrients around. Tiny moss mites dine on miniature worms called nematodes. Nematodes consume single-celled amoebas, far smaller than our eyes can see. Amoebas devour even tinier bacteria. And bacteria also need to eat. They feed on the remains of previous generations of forest dwellers. In nature, nothing is wasted. The fungal hyphae decompose matter too, and we can follow them toward the roots of the Douglas fir. The fungus wraps around the root tip. Viewing a slice through the root, we see hyphae pushing into the spaces between the tree's cells. At the molecular scale, a chemical exchange takes place. The fungus supplies the tree with much needed minerals, while the tree provides the fungus with energy-rich sugars. Nutrients for energy. A fair trade.
Plants aid in the development of the soil through the addition of organic matter from their falling leaves and other tissues, and through the addition of sugars and carbohydrates exuded by their roots. Fungi and bacteria decompose this organic matter into a semi-soluble chemical substance known as humus. During this process, microbes secrete sticky gum-like mucilages. These contribute to the crumbly structure of the soil by adhering the particles together and allowing greater aeration of the soil. Larger soil organisms like earthworms, beetles, ants, and termites vertically redistribute this humus within the mineral matter found beneath the surface of the soil. Humus provides soil with a number of very important benefits. Acting like a sponge, it enhances a soil's ability to hold and store more moisture. It limits the leaching of soluble nutrients from the soil. It improves soil structure, necessary for plant growth, by organizing and clumping together the minerals and organic matters particles in the soil. This improves drainage and reduces erosion of the soil. Humus provides long-term storage of abundant carbon in the soil by transferring carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and organic matter from plants and dead organisms into the soil. Soil organic matter is about 45 to 58% carbon. An undisturbed soil can store the carbon for thousands of years. Trees and forests are the premier producers and storers of soil organic carbon. Wetlands produced and supported by forest habitats also contain huge amounts of carbon stored in their soils. The storing of the carbon in the soil is also known as soil sequestration. Up to 2/3 or more of the carbon found in forests can be stored in their soils. Through their greater leaf surface and greater overall mass, including their roots, trees are able to breathe in and store more carbon in their tissues and their soils than any other plants on land. Trees grow huge amounts of organic matter in their leaves or needles, which are all eventually shed and must be regrown, either continually or seasonally. Trees continue to grow, store, and deliver more carbon to their leaves, branches, trunks, roots, and to their soil partners for their entire long lives. The evolution of larger plants such as trees and their spread over much of the land's surface contributed to their removing more and more excess heat-producing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and converting it to storage in their tissues and in the soil. This helped create favorable climate conditions for land creatures such as human beings and millions of our fellow species to evolve and thrive on land. 80% of land animals, birds, and plants live in forests. Trees also help capture our favorable climate through generating water vapor. Forests capture rainfall with their leaves and spongy soils. Forests and their soils regulate stream flow and support groundwater recharge. They also act as natural purifiers, filtering water. Forests transfer rainfall underground and pump the water back up like a fountain to release it from their leaves, creating cloud rivers in the sky. The cloud rivers created by forests migrate their water inland from the ocean on wind currents, bringing rainfall to the center of continents. Over 75% of the world's accessible fresh water comes from forested watersheds. The water-related ecosystem services provided by forests and their soils are essential for supporting life on the land. Tropical forests pump huge amounts of water into the air, serving as natural air conditioners that cool the Earth's surface. Crops and pastures pump much less water, so they are hotter and drier. The forest water pump enhances rainfall for agriculture nearby. By contrast, deforestation can harm agriculture nearby and half a world away. Let's look further into water's impact on climate and soils.
When we think about climate change, we tend to think about carbon dioxide in the atmosphere warming the planet. Carbon is so central to our thinking about the climate that many other important aspects are excluded from the conversation. One of these things is water. Water is actually the dominant greenhouse gas, but its global effects are difficult to measure because it doesn't spread out evenly in the atmosphere like carbon does. Its effect on temperature also depends on the many forms it takes. When it takes the form of a haze, it has a warming effect. When it takes the form of clouds, it has a cooling effect, except for at night, in which it has a subtle warming effect. Since atmospheric water is hard to model, it tends to get ignored. But temperature is not the only important aspect of the climate here. If the climate can be warm or cold, the climate can also be wet or dry. The rampant rise of floods and droughts of our time are said to be caused by climate change, but really they are climate change. While temperature does have some effect on rainfall, floods and droughts are primarily caused by disruptions to the hydrological cycle. We tend to think of the water cycle this way. Rain falls, water evaporates, condenses into clouds, and repeats. But this is only part of the picture, since a lot more happens underground. Healthy soil is like a sponge that soaks up a lot of water. Some of it is taken up and stored by plants, and some of it percolates deep down into aquifers. This groundwater wells up and feeds springs and streams, which allows even more life to thrive. There's then much more water to evaporate from the saturated ground or to transpire through plants. This abundance of water vapor allows for more consistent rainfall. So what happens if we cut down the forest, plow the grasslands, and expose the soil? Without trees or plants to buffer the rain, the heavy downpour compacts the soil. The water can't soak down into the compacted ground, so almost all of it stays above ground and we have a flood. Almost all this water runs off, carrying loads of topsoil with it. and when the rain stops, the little water there is left evaporates very quickly, leaving the ground compact and dry. This lack of percolation depletes the groundwater over time, so it can't feed the streams, which dry up. Now there's no water in the land to feed rain clouds, and we have a drought. If a rainstorm does come, it just creates another flood and worsens the subsequent drought. Instead of consistent rainfall, we have a flood-drought cycle. Fortunately, it is possible to reverse this trend. There are ways to regenerate ecosystems and restore the water cycle pretty rapidly while feeding people in the process. Making subtle changes to the land's topography can slow the flow of water, allowing more of it to soak into the ground and be used by plants. Plants with deep roots help break up the compacted soil, allowing water to percolate deeper. Everyone has a place in reversing the climate crisis. Whether you're working to protect healthy ecosystems, regenerate damaged ones, or just helping yourself or your neighbor depend a little less on industrial agriculture, you are helping the Earth heal.
Globally, soils contain more than 3 times as much carbon as the atmosphere, and 4.5 times more carbon than the world's plant and animal life. Therefore, even small changes in soil carbon stocks can lead to large changes in the atmosphere concentration of carbon dioxide, leading to more global warming. Despite their importance, stocks of soil organic carbon have been constantly depleted through human changes in land use and land cover, and unsustainable land management practices associated with deforestation, agriculture, and overgrazing. The continual growth and death of plants in huge ancient swampy forests contributed to vast underground stores of carbon that became coal, as those ancient forests were drowned, buried, and compressed over time. Since around the 1800s, humans had been removing and burning the ancient forests that created coal, as well as the seed, plant, and creature deposits, which created oil and gas in the oceans. The burning of these fossil fuels are the cause of around 75% of the climate changing gases released into the atmosphere. The distribution and amounts of plant life and their soils on the surface of the earth can either contribute to more carbon released to the atmosphere when they are burned or converted to other uses that release their carbon, or they can help to remove that carbon from the atmosphere and restore a healthy climate. In fact, trees and their healthy soils are so important that about 17 to 20% of the climate crisis is due to deforestation. Grasslands, which occur naturally in 30% of the world's landmass in areas with lower rainfall, also lose much of their soil carbon when they are converted to typical cropland agriculture or are overgrazed by livestock. When trees are cut down, they lose most of their carbon stored in their tissues, even if they eventually become a chair or are used in buildings. Only about 15% of the carbon remains in the wood after processing. There are immediate losses of carbon from the soil after deforestation, as soil organisms that were fed carbohydrates by the tree's roots die off. The soil creatures sustained by the forest leaves and organic materials die as well, and they release their carbon back to the atmosphere. Even if the forest is allowed to regrow into forest, it will take decades and sometimes as long as a century before the carbon lost through the original deforestation is recaptured in the new tree's tissues and rebuilt soils. Even more of the stored organic soil carbon will be lost and released to the atmosphere if the forest is converted to agriculture or another land use. Historical and current agricultural practices cause the loss of much more soil carbon through tilling, also known as plowing, which causes the texture of the soil to break up, dry out, and become fragmented on top. It also becomes compacted farther below the soil, making the soil unable to move water underground. Typical agricultural practices also leave the soil uncovered, with no plants growing in it through parts of the year, leaving it vulnerable to erosion and losses of the soil carbon found in the topsoil through wind and rain runoff. Some prairie soils have lost more than 50% of their deep-rooted organic soil matter as a result of standard agricultural practices for crop production. These agricultural practices led to devastation, like the American Dust Bowl of the 1930s, when the topsoil on 1 million acres dried up and blew away. Deserts have been created in the former Fertile Crescent of the Middle East and many other parts of the world through deforestation and overgrazing. Land that has been deforested does not store nearly as much carbon and does not provide our inland rainfall, stormwater management, migration of water to underground aquifers, cooler ground surface temperatures, and vibrant, safe homes for billions of species. Nearly half of all Earth's trees have been shaved off the face of the Earth, primarily for conversion to agriculture. This has resulted in the release of 133 billions of tons of carbon from the soil into the atmosphere, on top of the loss of most of the carbon in the biomass of the trees themselves. Trees continue to be cut down at an unsustainable and rapid rate, and trees are currently prevented from regrowing in much of their original territories, primarily through land use change to cropland and pasture. For what creatures have humans cut down nearly half of Earth's forests to replace them with artificially maintained grasslands, or more recently, billions of acres of corn and soybeans? Livestock animals, mostly cows. Tropical forests, which cool and moisturize the hottest parts of the earth and help rainfall migrate all over the world, are being cut down at a rapid rate for cows. 80% of deforestation in the Amazon basin is for cattle. Livestock's production covers more than 1/4 of Earth's land surface area, occupying more land than forests. Globally, we produce and consume more than twice as much meat as we did 40 years ago. The U.S. is the world's largest beef producer and exporter, as well as one of the leading beef importers. About 75 to 80% of grass-fed beef sold in the U.S. is grown abroad, from Australia, New Zealand, and parts of South America. By law, if meat is processed or passes through a USDA-inspected plant, a requirement for all imported beef, it can be labeled as a product from the U.S. 77% of all agricultural land is dedicated to livestock as pasture or for growing crops. Globally, Americans eat larger amounts of meat and dairy per person than in most other countries. Overall, meat consumption has continued to rise in the US, European Union, and developed world. Despite a shift towards higher poultry consumption, red meat still represents the largest proportion of meat consumed in the US, at 58%. The US is also one of the world's top producers and consumers of dairy. Unfortunately, right now, most pasture-fed livestock can actually create more overall emissions and use more water than livestock animals raised in feedlots. Livestock now represents 60% of all mammal biomass on Earth. The production of livestock animals has reduced the numbers of wild birds and mammals to only 4 to 6% of all land animals, and destruction of wild habitats for cows and for palm oil plantations is driving many of the remaining animals and birds to extinction. Sheep, goats, and cows burp large amounts of methane, a more potent climate-damaging gas, as a byproduct of their digestion. Also known as enteric fermentation, This belching effect is responsible for 40% of their direct emissions. Agricultural production of livestock is responsible for 15 to 18% of all climate changing gases, more than the entire transportation sector. Cows take 15 to 20 times more land and more water to grow than comparable nutrition from plants, and significantly more than eggs or poultry. Agriculture uses 53% of the groundwater pumped in the US and 87% of water use overall. Our current agricultural system withdraws huge and unsustainable amounts of water from our underground aquifer systems, such that the availability of fresh water is declining rapidly. Our US water resources are already under medium stress, and with climate change disruptions in the amount and distribution of rainfall increasing, conserving fresh water resources, and preserving and increasing forests that contribute to water management and underground water storage is critical to preventing further water shortages. Shrimp farming and development destroys mangrove forests, which help protect coasts from floods and hurricanes and creates nurseries for aquatic life. Wetland soils hold large stores of carbon, which are released when they are deforested or drained. Another leading cause of deforestation, soil destruction, and emissions is palm oil production. Palm oil can be found in almost half of the products found in our grocery stores. Boreal forests are being cut down for luxury toilet paper and other non-recycled paper products, causing the release of their abundant soil carbon stores to the atmosphere. Long before humans began burning fossil fuels, which are responsible for about 75% of damaging global warming gases now, deforestation and agricultural practices that cause destruction of healthy soils, including tilling and overgrazing by livestock, caused regional climate changes. And this caused the decline and collapse of many ancient societies. Let us choose to not suffer the fate of these communities, either on a regional or worldwide basis, by ignoring the land use impacts causing 1/4 of the climate crisis emissions. There are many very accessible solutions to bring back healthy soils and forests and their ability to recapture the excess carbon in the atmosphere to restore our livable climate. We're now going to watch a hopeful film that shows how permaculture agroforestry practices are restoring soils, water, and life in a barren desert in the Middle East. There are numerous successes like this taking place in many countries all over the world. You can search YouTube and find lots of these amazing videos as agriculture is being converted to more sustainable practices.
So we went and had a look and we thought, oh no, this is the end of the earth. This is like as hard as you can get. This is hyper arid, and it's 10 acres of almost dead flat, completely salted landscape, 400 meters below sea level, the lowest place on earth, 2 kilometers from the Dead Sea, right, to about 2 kilometers where Jesus was christened. We've hardly got any rainfall. We've got temperatures in August that go over 50 degrees. Everybody's farming under plastic strips. Everybody's spray. Everybody's putting synthetic fertilizer on, overgrazed with goats, just like maggots eating the flesh off the bone down to the bones of the country, literally like maggots, giant maggots eating it to nothing. So we designed up a system that would harvest every single bit of rainwater that fell on it. On 10 acres there's 1.5 kilometers of swale water harvesting ditch on contour, and when they're full 1 million litres of water soak into the landscape, and they'll fill quite a few times over a winter. And then we heavily mulched those swales with organic matter, which was trash from organic fields nearby. And we put that almost 1/2 metre deep. So we saved that and mulched our swales, which are about 2 metres wide and 1/2 metre deep on the trench. Then we put micro irrigation underneath the mulch. And then on the uphill side of the water harvesting trench, we put nitrogen fixing very hardy pioneer desert trees, which help shade and reduce wind evaporation, and also put nitrogen into the soil and structure the soil for us. And then on the lower side of the trench, we put fruit trees, majoring in date palms as the long-term overstory in the end. And then we put in figs, pomegranates, guavas, mulberries, now some citrus. Within 4 months we had figs a metre high with figs on, which is impossible. We'd done a course, male and female course, trained up some locals, and we got a translator who's working for the project. He had his degree in agriculture in the Jordan University, and he got onto his mates and said in the agricultural department, well, you said we couldn't grow figs, we got figs growing and we got figs on them. You better come and test the soil, because no matter what you say, we're either growing in salty soil what we shouldn't be growing, or we've desalted the soil, and we'd like to know what we've done. They came in and the salt levels were dropping, so they became interested. The salt levels were dropping around the swales. They said, you must have washed it through. See, normally put a huge amount of water on and wash the salt through to the lower levels, which just makes the groundwater more salty. In the end, you'll salt it 20 metres deep if you keep doing that, and then it will take 1,000 years to recover. And we used only 1/5 the amount of water. So the water, they thought we'd washed it all through. No, we'd used 1/5. That really got them when they realised how much water we hadn't used. With the same amount of water normally used on that much area, we could have done 50 acres. Originally, people laughed at us because we didn't put straight lines in. We went on contour with these swales. They thought, why don't you put it so you've got a bulldozer, you can flatten the desert, you can straighten it. So we want to go on contour because we've got a longer edge and we harvest the water passively. Then we planted more non-fruiting trees than we did fruit trees, so they laughed at us. Because we were planting unproductive things, more than productive things. What's the point, you know? In soil that won't even grow anything, so, you know. And then we covered all the inside of the swale with a huge amount of mulch, where they scrape all their organic matter off and burn it, like most traditional agriculture. In the middle of winter, we got a funny email saying, we've got a problem. We've got mushrooms growing in the swale. Well, they called it fungus, but when we saw a photograph of it, it was mushrooms, because they'd never seen mushrooms, because they never had that much humidity in living history in the soil. And when you open up the mulch, there's all these little animals there, you know, there's little insects, and the soil has come alive. And the fungi net that's underneath the mulch is putting off a waxy substance, which is repelling the salt away from the area. And the decomposition is locking the salt up. And the salt is not gone, it's become inert and insoluble. So we could regreen the Middle East, we could regreen any desert, and we could desalt it at the same time. And if we can do it on an insignificant, flat, little bit of 10 acres of flat desert, if you give us something with catchment, or a wadi, or a canyon, or any of those erosion gullies, we can turn it right around completely. You can fix all the world's problems in a garden. You can solve them all in a garden. You can solve all your pollution problems and all your supply line needs in a garden. Now, most people actually today don't actually know that, and that makes most people very insecure.
This graphic of natural climate solutions for the United States shows our potential for increasing carbon drawdown in forests, agriculture, and wetlands if we insist on and support immediate governmental policies to maintain and increase storage of carbon in natural solutions and soils. These natural solutions will be enormously increased as we also modify our own lifestyle habits to help achieve climate healing goals. Contact your local, state, and federal legislators repeatedly until new laws are passed. Insist that our government preserve and increase local, state, and federal forests to grow forever wild, to recapture and store the man-made airborne carbon, which is too abundant in our atmosphere now. Even as we save our public forests to not be harvested, there will still be plenty of privately owned land available to provide for all of our wood needs for building and to provide habitats for creatures that use successional habitats. Let us employ and support all our existing and future public lands to restore and maintain our healthy climate and provide creatures with habitats the way nature has been doing it for them for millions of years, untampered by humans. Here are the top forest climate solutions, with the most cost-effective and easy one being to protect existing natural forests by leaving them alone. On the agricultural side, here are solutions we can all contribute to with our food choices, 3 meals a day. The Northeast Organic Farming Association has a map of organic regenerative farms at their website. True regenerative farmers use organic practices, which include cover crops and no use of chemical pesticides or fertilizers, which kill carbon-storing soil creatures. Grass-fed beef without managed rotational grazing techniques is not true regenerative farming and creates more harmful methane emissions than feedlot livestock. Here are some local farm resources for finding food grown with true regenerative practices near Massachusetts, USA. Please support these hardworking climate heroes or seek out one's farming regeneratively in your area, wherever you live.
Hi, everyone, and thanks again, Kate. That was great. My name's Carol Horowitz. I'm from the Farming, Forest, and Food Committee of Climate Action Now. So the first question we have is, given the importance of carbon drawdown and sequestration, where does biomass fit into a climate plan, Kate?
Biomass is a completely unsustainable use of forests. A lot of our amazing forests are being cut down and shipped off to Europe to burn in their former coal plants. And they're saying that this kind of use of a forest is carbon neutral because the forest will eventually grow back and sequester the carbon. And that's complete nonsense. It is creating emissions as the trees are burned. It's dirtier than coal, and it will take many, many years before the forest can regrow to recapture all that carbon that was lost in the process of foresting. So biomass is not carbon neutral. It's an extremely dirty and dangerous way that harms our earth and creates more emissions.
Can you talk about what resources farmers might need to convert from, say, organic farming, if they're already organic farmers, to convert to no tillage? Is there special equipment needed?
Yeah, it's a very different kind of system. So we really need to help our farmers reinvest in some of these systems and learn them. It's something that's really important for us to support through our, to ask our legislators to provide more support to farmers, because farmers are very hard put already, and to ask them to relearn how to grow their food so that we can help preserve, create a better climate. It's a lot to ask, and we really need to support them. We need to be prepared to support them by buying their products, by seeking out products that are grown with these methods, no-till, using organic farming already uses cover crops, but a lot of organic farms don't use a no-till system, which is the system where you plow and break up the soil. I know that a future speaker, Ed Stockman, is from NOFA, and he will be helping us learn a lot more about some of these growing methods. And another of our future speakers, Eric Tonsmeyer, is an absolute expert on carbon farming, which is what this is called, bringing carbon back into the soil through farming techniques. So both of those speakers will give us a lot more information about those kinds of techniques that we need to ask our legislatures to support farmers in being able to use all these really powerful growing techniques to help our soil stay healthy and sequester more carbon.
Thank you. Are you aware of any efforts to for farmers to pool their resources, or is the state giving any help, any state agencies giving help to farmers to purchase, equipment that I've seen in films mostly?
Not that I know of. There is a bill, there is a Healthy Soils bill in our legislature that begins to address that issue of farmers needing a lot more support. It doesn't go quite far enough. We're at the very, very ground level of being able to support farmers. One of the best resources for farmers is, again, NOFA, the Northeast Organic Farmers Association, because organic already gets us part way into having healthy soils. Organic practices don't use the pesticides and the fertilizers that kill soil organisms. They already use cover crops and other techniques that help preserve the soil, because organic is all about healthy soil. And now they're needing our support and our help to be able to go the next steps that it takes to really, truly make agriculture the best that it can be.
Great. Which soils or plants can you talk about might do a better job of drawing down or sequestering carbon? Is it more, are trees more important? Are farms more important? Should we focus on all of it?
So trees are the most important thing for us to protect as many existing forests and let them grow old. That is the premier carbon sequestering, bringing that carbon dioxide that's causing so much problem in our atmosphere. The most efficient and effective way to bring it down is to preserve and protect our existing forests. Next is to also reforest areas that have been converted, and making sure that we don't cut down forest for solar fields. That's just going in the opposite direction. It's kind of like you're taking a couple steps forward, but you're also taking steps back, because trees, you're not allowing that land to bring carbon dioxide down anymore when you remove trees for solar. And then but agriculture uses so much of our land surface that we can't ignore all the amazing agricultural techniques that are coming online to be able to create healthy soils, because we all need to eat. So it's really, really important that we put a lot of time and resources into making sure that the food that we eat doesn't contribute to carbon going up into the atmosphere. We want the food that we eat to also contribute to bringing that carbon down. And other future speakers will absolutely address the agricultural piece. And we have our forest series, which we've had a lot of amazing speakers who've talked about the importance of forests and ways to preserve forests. So I really highly recommend that everybody check out our videos that we have at the Climate Action Now website for all of our forest speakers. We had quite a lot of amazing speakers who gave us a lot of information about forests.
There's these initiatives around the world about planting 1 million trees. And what do you think of those efforts?
So some of those are wolf in sheep's clothing. During our forest series, one of the speakers, and I'm sorry I don't remember which one, said that there are some forest initiatives that are designed to create forests to be cut down by the logging industry. And then we have to be really careful that if we're putting public money into planting forests, that those forests are protected to become wild. It's very important that we're not planting forests that are going to be harvested in 20 years. There is a place for forestry, and on one of my slides of solutions, bamboo is an amazing substance. It's actually not a tree, it's a grass, and it grows continually. You can harvest it, you can cut it down, and the soil carbon stays in the soil and the plant regrows. I mean, you have to give it resources to help it grow, but it's a very renewable way of producing wood for pulp paper and also for building things. So there are solutions. I mean, you obviously need some substance to build with, and you do need to allot some of the forest to be able to use for building materials. You just have to stop using forests unnecessarily to create biomass, and you need to be very conservative about using the forests for wood resources and not be wasteful with that amazing resource that forests create our climate. We really need to honor that and protect as many of them as we possibly can.
We might only have time for this one last question. Can people, which is a really important question, I think, that we'll all be interested in. Can people make changes in their home gardens that will help the soil and draw down carbon?
Yeah, there are. And I think hopefully one of our future speakers from NOFA will talk about the process of homesteading, which is people like me, because I've been growing gardens for years. I've been growing organic gardens for years. So growing organically is the first step. And there's lots of resources to help people learn how to grow organically. There's tons of videos on YouTube about growing things, but now even more, there's lots of videos on YouTube about being able to use cover crops, and that's one way that you can help keep the carbon in the soil is by making sure that that soil isn't bare, that when you leave the ground bare, the soil is exposed to the elements and it breaks it down. But if you cover it with other crops, then the soil organisms are continually fed and nourished. So those are a couple of the things: using cover crops when you're growing food, making sure that you're not using pesticides, making sure that you're using organic fertilizers. Those are all ways that you can grow a lot of food in a very small space and also be helping your soils.
And do you have any specific cover crops that you would recommend to home gardeners?
So I just planted a mix that I got from NOFA, and I know that it has radishes in it, it has clover, it has winter rye, vetch. Those are all good cover crops. Clover is another, annual clover is another good cover crop.
And I don't know if you know anything about this, but how about, could you plant that on and have that be your lawn?
So a lot of those plants are annual plants that are designed to be winter killed so that your ground is available. Like the plants are holding the soil with their roots in place, but the tops of the plants are going to be killed during the winter, except for the rye. There's other ways that you can use plants to substitute for lawn, that you can create meadows with that are perennial plants. And perennial plants are actually the more exciting part of both farming and also, creating other habitats. Perennial plants don't die every year. Their roots are in the soil permanently. And there's, in permaculture, which is a whole system of gardening, they teach gardeners and farmers how to use a lot of perennial plants, like trees and berry bushes and asparagus and there's all kinds of perennial plants that just keep coming back year after year, which is amazing. And you want to also do that in your lawn. Like letting your lawn grow to be a meadow is a really good way to create more health in the soil. And we had a wonderful speaker who talked about how to create meadows in your lawns. And if you're able to, plant some trees in your lawn, particularly if you have space to plant fruit trees, not only are you going to help bring carbon into the soil from the tree, you're also going to have some wonderful fruit that you can eat. So it's a win-win situation. So if you're able to plant some trees, fruit trees stay small, so even if you have a small space, you can plant a fruit tree.
Okay, I think we're going to have to end there with the questions and answers, but thank you so much, Kate. That was illuminating.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's such a pleasure to be able to share this information.
I hold a tiny lettuce seed in the palm of my hand. It's full of magic life to be transformed, pressed into land. Another seed I hold will grow into a mighty tree to give me oxygen, food, rain, and shelter services for free. The magic and the mysteries of water, air, and soil and trees, turning sun's great energy into life for you and me. The gifts of earth that cradle us, feed and house, nurture our loves. Let us seek to harmonize with all this love that comes for free. Radiating beams of light descending through the sky, give life to everything that slithers, swims, and walks and flies. Absorbed by plants, transforming light to energy for food. Sun shines for free, we've really got it good. The magic and the mysteries of water, air, and soil and trees, turning sun's great energy into life for you and me. The gifts of earth that cradle us, feed and house, nurture our loves. Let us seek to harmonize with all this love that comes for free. No life on land exists without soil creatures' hidden toil. Gazillions of them underground create nutritious soil. Microbes, worms, and bugs storing carbon underground co-create our healthy climate when we leave them where they're found. The magic and the mysteries of water, air, and soil and trees, turning sun's great energy into life for you and me. The gifts of earth that cradle us, feed and house, nurture our loves. Let us seek to harmonize with all this love that comes for free. Cool air flows into my chest, I pull a deeper breath, absorbing love to fuel my flowing rivers of The exhale of trees through great green leaves gives me this simple gift, and a life-sustaining climate for us all. Love comes for free to you and me in cascading waterfalls. Raindrops gathered from the sky flow life's current through us all. Give care to our great gifts of life, lest their magic goes away. Our fragile lives depend on them every single day. The magic and the mysteries of water, air, and soil and trees, turning sun's great energy into life for you and me. The gifts of earth that cradle us, feed and house, nurture our loves. Let us seek to harmonize with all this love that comes for free. Let us seek to harmonize with all this love that comes for free.